Hello, students. I hope you all are doing good. So, today we will cover some important topics from chapter Atoms. In this lecture, we will cover NCERT section 12.2.1 to 12.2.2 and example 12.1, 12.2, and 12.3. This is disclaimer. So, let's start by looking at what you will be able to understand after this lecture. So you will learn about the impact parameter in alpha particle scattering. The impact parameter is the perpendicular distance between the path of an incoming alpha particle and the center of the nucleus it approaches. You will explore the Rutherford's nuclear model of atom. Okay, and you will be able to understand the key postulates and see how the electrostatic force between the nucleus and the electron provides the centripetal force needed for the electron's circular motion. So, index of the topics that we are going to cover today according to NCERT. So, in today's lecture, we will cover NCERT section 12.2.1, which is alpha particle trajectory. After this, we will cover example 12.1. Next, we will cover example 12.2. Then we will cover NCERT section 12.2.2 electron orbits. And at last, we will cover the example 12.3. So let's start by looking at the concept of the impact parameter. The idea is important for understanding how particles like alpha particles interact with atomic nuclei. We will break down what the impact parameter means and why it's useful in analyzing particle trajectories. So this diagram, okay, it shows the path of trajectory of an alpha particle as it approaches a nucleus. Okay, so you can see Ze plus Ze, that is nucleus. Z is the atomic number of that element whose nucleus is placed here. Okay, and alpha particle plus 2e is coming towards the nucleus with initial velocity vector v. Okay, and it is being scattered when it is coming close to the nucleus. Okay, so at some angle that is called scattering angle theta. Okay, so the distance that is between the perpendicular distance between the initial velocity vector, means the initial direction of velocity, and the position of the nucleus. Okay, perpendicular distance between the nucleus and initial velocity vector is denoted as b. Okay, so this is the interpretation of figure. So what is definition of impact parameter? So impact parameter b is the perpendicular distance of initial velocity vector of alpha particle from the center of the nucleus. Okay, so we are drawing a line which is passing through the center of the nucleus, and a perpendicular distance from that line to the initial velocity vector, means initial direction of velocity of alpha particle with before scattering, is the impact parameter, and it is denoted as b. Okay, so the initial velocity vector tells us the direction the alpha particle is moving before it feels any force from the nucleus. This means before the nucleus starts to deflect the particle, its path is a straight line. Okay, so diagram shows the trajectory of alpha particle as they approaches a nucleus. So figure 12.4, trajectory of alpha particles in the Coulomb field of target nucleus. The impact parameter b and the scattering angle theta are also depicted. So you can see in the diagram, there is a target nucleus and number of alpha particles are coming at different impact parameters at different perpendicular distance from the nucleus. Okay, so you can see the alpha particle that are close to the nucleus, that are coming close to the nucleus, are deflected by greater angle, greater theta, and the alpha particle that are going away from the nucleus, that are at far distance from the nucleus, they are deflected less. Okay, so let's consider what happens when the impact parameter b is large. Okay, this means the alpha particle passes far from the nucleus. So with the large impact parameter, the alpha particle feels only a weak repulsive force from the positively charged nucleus. Since the force is weaker at greater distances, the particle's path is only slightly affected. As a result, the alpha particle undergoes only a small deflection, meaning the scattering angle theta is small. So when B is large, particle's path barely changes direction and it is deflected through very small angle. Now let's look at what happens when the impact parameter B is small. This means the alpha particle comes much closer to the nucleus during its approach. So with a small impact parameter, the repulsive force between the alpha particle and the nucleus becomes much stronger. Remember, the electrostatic force increases as the distance decreases. Okay, so electrostatic force increases as the distance between two charges decreases. Okay, so according to F equal to K Q1 Q2 upon R square. Okay, so if R is increasing, or we can say if R is decreasing, distance between two charged particles is decreasing, electrostatic force between these two charges is increased. Okay, so because of this strong force, the alpha particle is deflected because alpha particle and nucleus are now close. Okay, so alpha particle is passing close to the target nucleus, so strong force is experienced. So due to this strong force, the alpha particle is deflected by a much larger angle. In other words, theta is large when B is small. B means impact parameter. And the particle's path changes direction significantly. Finally, let's consider a special case of head-on collision where the impact parameter is 0. Okay, when alpha particle is directly coming towards nucleus. Okay, means head-on collision. This means the alpha particle is aimed directly at the nucleus. In a head-on collision, the alpha particle experiences the maximum possible repulsive force and is turned completely around, retracing its path. Okay, this corresponds to scattering angle of 180 degrees. Okay, or pi radians, we can say. Okay, so the alpha particle will retrace its path. It is scattered through 180 degree angle. Now here you can see the diagram again, and which is showing the path of alpha particle as it approaches a nucleus. Okay, so let's introduce Rutherford's scattering formula. This formula predicts how many alpha particles will be scattered at different angles when they hit a thin metal foil. Okay, so according to Rutherford's formula, the number of alpha particles n theta. So what is the number n theta? N in bracket theta. It is representing the number of alpha particles scattered at an angle theta per unit area depend on the angle. And it's also depend on the angle. So how many number of alpha particles are scattered at particular angle theta per unit area is represented by n theta. N theta means the count of particles deflected or detected at a specific angle. We will see how this relationship works in this next step. So the formula tells us n theta is proportional to 1 divided by sine to power 4 theta by 2. Sine raised to power 4 theta by 2. So this is the formula for number of alpha particles scattered at an angle theta, that is n theta. So n theta is proportional to 1 by sine raised to power 4 theta by 2. This means as the scattering angle increases, the number of particles detected or deflected at that angle drops off very quickly because sine is raised to power 4. Okay, if angle of deflection is increased, means how many alpha particles are deflected at particular angle theta, so theta is increased, then number of particles for that theta will be very, very small. Okay, that means large number of alpha particles are deflected at small angles. Okay, and very few alpha particles are scattered at large angles. Okay, so if theta is 30 degree, sine 15 degree is about 0.26 and sine raised to power 4 15 degrees is about 0.0046, making n theta much larger for small angles than for large ones. Okay, so this result matched the experimental data extremely well, confirming the Rutherford's model of the atom. The sharp decrease in scattered particle at larger angles showed that most of the atom is empty spaced. Okay, so with a small dense nucleus at the center. Now let's see example 12.1. So question asks you to compare the size ratio of the nucleus to the atom. Okay. And radius of nucleus is approximately 1 femtometer. That is 10 to the power minus 15 meter, or we can say 1 Fermi. Okay. And so in the Rutherford nuclear model of atom, the nucleus is analogous to the sun, about which the electron move in a orbit. And radius of electron orbit is 10 to the power minus 10 meter. Okay. Like the Earth's orbit around the sun. If the dimensions of solar system had the same proportions as the atom. Okay. So what are the dimensions of solar system? Means radius of solar system and radius of the orbit of Earth. Okay. That ratio or that dimensions, the ratio of that dimensions would be proportional to, will have same proportion as those of the atom. Okay. If we take the ratio of orbit of electron to the nucleus, to the size of nucleus, and it is that ratio will be proportional to or will be equal to the ratio of orbit of the Earth to the size of the sun. Okay. Then we have to calculate the radius. Then we have to calculate the radius of Earth's orbit. Okay. So what would the Earth be closer to or farther away from the sun than it is actually is? Okay. So the radius of Earth is actually 1.5 into 10 to the power. So what is the radius of Earth's orbit is about 1.5 into 10 to the power 11 meter. Okay. So if solar system had the same proportion as that of the atom, if the dimensions of the solar system had the same proportion as that of the atom, so we have to find that Earth would be closer or farther away from the sun than actually it is. Okay. And the radius of the sun is given 7 into 10 to the power 8 meter. Okay. So let's start by finding the radius of electron's orbit to the radius of nucleus. So we will find the ratio of radius of electron orbit to the radius of nucleus. That this ratio will help us compare the scale of atom to the scale of the solar system. Remember, the radius is just the distance from the center to the edge. And we are comparing how much bigger the atom is compared to its nucleus. Okay, so let's calculate the ratio. We take the electron's orbit radius, which is 10 to the power minus 10 meter, and divided with the nucleus radius or nucleus size, which is 10 to the power minus 50. This gives us a ratio of 10 to the power 5, which is 1 lakh. Okay, this means the electron orbit is 1 lakh times bigger than the nucleus. Okay, so what does this ratio tells? It means that in the atom, the electron orbit is 1 lakh times bigger than the nucleus. If we use the same proportion for the solar system, we would compare the Earth's orbit to the sun's radius in the way. Okay, if we are taking the same proportion, that means the radius of Earth's orbit should be 1 lakh times greater than the radius of sun. Okay, so we would compare the Earth's orbit to the sun's radius in the same way. This sets up the answer, the main question about whether the Earth would be closer to or farther from the sun if the solar system had atomic proportions. Okay, so let's calculate what Earth's orbital radius would be if it were scaled up in the same way as the atom. In an atom, the electron's orbit is about 1 lakh times, or we can say 10 to the power 5 times larger than the nucleus. So if we multiply the sun's radius 7 times 10 to the power 8 meters by 10 to the power 5, okay, we get 7 to 10 to the power 13 meters. This would be the new radius of Earth's orbit if solar system had the same proportions as an atom. Okay, so this would be the new radius of Earth's orbit if we take the same proportions of solar system as an atom. Okay, so now let's compare the scaled up orbital radius to the actual radius of Earth's orbit, which is 1.5 times 10 to the power 11 meter. Okay, notice that 7 times 10 to the power 13 meter is more than 100 times greater than the real distance. Okay, this shows that just how much farther away the earth would be from the sun if solar system had the same proportion as the atom. So what does this mean? It means that in this analogy, the earth would be much farther away from the sun than it actually is. This highlights the huge difference in the scale between the empty space in an atom and the empty space in our solar system. Okay, to sum up, this comparison tells us that atoms are mostly empty space, much more so than our solar system. So they are more empty spaced than our solar system. The nucleus is tiny compared to overall size of atom, just like the sun is small compared to the solar system. But the atom's emptiness is on a whole different level. Okay, so now we'll see example 12.2. This question asks about the distance of closest approach for an alpha particle, which is a helium nucleus, as it moves towards the nucleus and comes to a stop before reversing direction. Okay, so this type of problem tests your understanding of electrostatic potential energy and conservation of energy in atomic physics. The key concept here is the kinetic energy of the incoming alpha particle is converted into electrostatic potential energy as it approaches the positively charged nucleus. Okay, so in question, in Geiger-Marsden experiment, what is the distance of closest approach to a nucleus of a 7.7 mega electron volt alpha particle before it comes momentarily to rest and reverses its direction? Okay, so distance of closest approach you have to find. So up to which distance it travels? Okay, up to which distance from the nucleus an alpha particle is traveling? So first, let's focus on the key idea. Throughout the scattering process, the total mechanical energy of the system is conserved. That means the sum of kinetic energy and potential energy stays the same as the alpha particle approaches the nucleus. Okay, so focus on that is a fundamental principle in physics. Energy can't be created or destroyed, only transformed. So now let's break down what that means for our solar system, or sorry, for our system. The initial mechanical energy, which we will call EI, is just the kinetic energy of alpha particle before it gets closer to the nucleus. The final mechanical energy, EF, is what the system has when the alpha particle comes to rest at its closest point from the nucleus. At that moment, all the kinetic energy has been converted into the electric potential energy. To be specific, the initial energy EI is the kinetic energy of the incoming alpha particle. The final energy F is the electric potential energy U between the alpha particle and the gold nucleus at the closest approach. Okay, and kinetic energy is measured in joules and electric potential energy depends on the charge and distance between them. So first, let's recall the concept of electric potential energy between two charges. The potential energy U tells us how much work is needed to bring two charges close together. This is a key concept in electrostatics. It's especially important when we talk about particles approaching a nucleus. Okay. So here is the formula for the potential energy between 2 point charges. U equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 upon R. Okay. And in this equation, Q1 and Q2 are the charges in coulombs. R is the distance between them. Okay, or we can say distance of separation between two charges when both are at rest. Okay, so nucleus is at rest, and alpha particle comes to rest for a moment. Okay, and after reversing its direction, it comes to rest, and the minimum distance from the nucleus up to which alpha particle approaches before reversing its direction is called distance of closest approach. Okay, so epsilon naught here is the permittivity of free space. So we'll define the distance between the center of alpha particle and the center of the gold nucleus at the stopping point D. Okay, now let's define the alpha particle has a charge of 2e. Okay, and gold nucleus has a charge of Ze, where Z is 79 for gold. Okay, and E is the elementary charge, which and its value is 1.6 times 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. So next, let's apply the principle of conservation of energy. The total energy before and after must be equal. Okay, so initially the alpha particle has only kinetic energy, and as it approaches the nucleus, that kinetic energy is converted into electric potential energy due to repulsion between the two positive charges. So the formula is K equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. Okay, so that kinetic energy is converted into potential energy. Okay, so formula for potential energy is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 by R, and that kinetic energy is converted into potential energy. So kinetic energy is equal to potential energy. So K is equal to potential energy. So kinetic energy is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. What is Q1? The charge of alpha particle 2e and charge of the nucleus is Ze. Okay, and distance between them is distance of closest approach. Okay, that is D. So after solving, it is 2Ze square upon 4 pi epsilon naught D, where K is the kinetic energy of alpha particle initially, which is equal to potential energy. After comparing it, EI equal to EF. Now let's solve for the distance of closest approach D. We are rearranging the equation to isolate D, which tells us how close the alpha particle can get before it stops. This is a direct application of energy conservation in electrostatics. So the formula for the distance of closest approach is D equal to 2Ze square upon 4 pi epsilon naught K. This means D depends on the charge of the nucleus Z. Okay, and charge of the alpha particle. Okay, and the initial kinetic energy K. If the kinetic energy increases, D gets smaller, meaning the particle can get closer to the nucleus. So let's talk about the kinetic energy of alpha particle. The maximum kinetic energy for naturally occurring alpha particle is about 7.7 mega electron volt. And kinetic energy is the energy an object has because of its motion. And here it's measured in mega electron volts. Okay, so let's convert that energy into joules since SI unit are standard in physics. So 1 mega electron volt is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 13 joules. So 7.7 mega electron volt becomes 7.7 times 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 13 joules. So multiplying those numbers, we get kinetic energy as 1.2 into 10 to the power minus 12 joule. Okay, small the value is, atomic scale energies are tiny compared to everyday amounts, but they are huge for particle like alpha particles. So let's recall some constants we will need. The value 1 divided by 4 pi epsilon naught is 9 to 10 to the power 9 Newton meter square per coulomb square. The elementary charge E is equal to 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. So we have D. So let's step out the formula for distance of closest approach D. The formula is D equals to 2 times Z E square divided by 4 pi epsilon naught K, where Z is atomic number of the nucleus, E is the charge of the alpha particle, K is the kinetic energy. So plugging in our values, we see that how the distance depends on the charge of the nucleus and energy of the alpha particle. So after substituting value, it will become 2 into 9 into 10 to the power 9 Newton meter square per coulomb square. Okay, multiply by what is E, 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb and E square. So it's square Z upon what is kinetic energy, 1.2 into 10 to the power minus 12 joule. Okay, now we'll solve it. So here we see the distance of closest approach D equal to 3.84 into 10 to the power minus 16 Z meters. In this equation, D is the distance in meters and Z is the atomic number of the nucleus we will use. Okay, this formula tells us that distance depends directly on the atomic number. So a higher Z means greater repulsive force and a larger distance. So now let's apply this to gold, which is material used in this experiment. So gold has an atomic number Z equal to 79. By substituting this value into our formula, we can calculate the actual distance for a gold nucleus. So doing the calculation, we multiply 3.84 multiplied by 10 to the power minus 16 by 79, which gives us dAu equal to 3.84 into 10 to the power minus 16 multiplied by 79, which is equal to 3 into 10 to the power minus 14 meter. Okay, so to make this value more meaningful, we convert meters into femtometers. Okay, so it will become 30 femtometer, or we can say 30 Fermi. 1 femtometer is called Fermi also. Okay, so the unit, the Fermi, is commonly used in nuclear physics to describe distances on the scale of atomic nuclei. So let's clarify what actually happens in Rutherford experiment. The alpha particles, which are positively charged, never physically touch the gold nucleus. Instead, they get very close and then turn back due to the strong repulsive force. This shows us that the nucleus is very small and that most of the atom is empty spaced. Now let's compare theory with measurements. Calculation based on the experiment suggested that gold nucleus should have a radius of less than 30 femtometers or Fermi. But when scientists actually measured it, they found it was only 6 Fermi. Okay, 1 Fermi is 1 times 10 to the power minus 15 meters. Okay, this big difference tells us the closest approach is much farther out than the actual edge of the nucleus. So the alpha particle is not touching the edge of the nucleus. It is coming very far away from it is reversing its direction very far away from the nucleus due to the force of repulsion. Okay, so why is such a difference? It's because distance of closest approach is much larger than the combined radii of gold nucleus and the alpha particle. In other words, the alpha particle is stopped by the repulsive force long before it could ever touch the nucleus itself. This shows how strong electrostatic forces can be at very short distances. So to sum up, the repulsive electrostatic force between the positively charged alpha particle and the gold nucleus is so strong that it causes the alpha particle to reverse direction well before reaching the nucleus. This experiment was key in showing the atoms have a tiny, dense, positively charged nucleus. Now we will discuss the postulates of Rutherford model of the atom. This model was a major step forward in our understanding of atomic structure. We will look at each key idea that Rutherford proposed and see how this model explained the results of this famous gold foil experiment. Let's start by first main point of Rutherford model. Based on his experiments, Rutherford suggested a new way to think about the atoms called the nuclear model. So first, Rutherford proposed that almost all the mass of the atom and its entire positive charge are concentrated in a tiny central region called the nucleus. This means the nucleus is extremely small compared to the overall size of the atom, but it contains nearly all the atom's mass. For example, if atom were the size of football stadium, the nucleus would be like a small marble at the center. Next, Rutherford said that the nucleus is surrounded by electrons, which carry a negative charge. These electrons are much lighter than the nucleus and move around it. This arrangement helps explain why atoms are mostly empty spaced. Rutherford also explained that total negative charge from all the electrons exactly balances the total positive charge of the nucleus. This balance makes the atom electrically neutral overall. So for example, a helium atom has 2 protons in the nucleus and 2 electrons orbiting around, making the total charge 0. So he further proposed that electrons revolve around the nucleus in circular orbits, similar to how planets orbit the sun. You can see this in the diagram here. This idea helps visualize the atom structure, even though we now know electrons don't follow perfect circles. The important point is that electrons are constantly moving around the nucleus. So Rutherford explained that force keeping the electrons in the orbits is the electrostatic force of attraction between the negatively charged electrons and the positively charged nucleus. This force acts as the necessary centripetal force, just like gravity keeps the planets in a orbit around the sun. This completes the main postulates of the Rutherford's model. So now let's start by looking at the orbital radius of an electron in a hydrogen atom. This is the distance from the nucleus to the electron as it moves in its orbit. Understanding this helps us see how force keep the electron in place around the nucleus. Now notice that electron is held in its orbit by electrostatic force of attraction between the negatively charged electron and the positively charged nucleus. This force acts as centripetal force, which is the force that keeps any object moving in a circle. Remember, centripetal force always point towards the center of the circle. For the electron to stay in a stable orbit, these two forces, the electrostatic force and centripetal force, must be equal. This is the key idea in atomic physics. We can use equations from earlier chapters, specifically the ones for electrostatic force and centripetal force, to set up this relationship. Okay, so for a dynamically stable orbit in a hydrogen atom and using 12.1 equation and equation 4.16 of chapter laws of motion. So we set the electrostatic force equal to centripetal force. This equation is our starting point for finding the relationship between the electron speed and its distance from the nucleus. Okay, so let's write out the full expression for both cases. So what is the electrostatic force according to equation 12.1? That is 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught E square upon R square. Okay, so what is electrostatic force between two charges? It is given by 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 upon the square of distance between them. Okay, so here charge on the hydrogen nucleus is E due to one proton, and one electron is there in the hydrogen atom having charge, magnitude of charge E. So E square, E multiplied by E square upon R square. And what is centripetal force according to equation 4.16 of chapter laws of motion? mv square by R, where R is the radius of orbit of electron, V is the velocity of electron, and m is the mass of the electron. So from this equation, we can solve for the relationship between the orbit radius R and the electron's velocity V. This tells us how the speed of the electron changes as its distance from the nucleus changes. If the electron moves faster, the radius gets smaller, and if it moves slower, the radius gets larger. Okay, so R is equal to E square upon 4 pi epsilon naught mv square. Mark it as 12.3 equation. This means the radius of electron orbit depends on the electron charge, the permittivity of free space, the electron's mass, and the square of the velocity. Okay, notice that if the velocity increases, the radius decreases. So let's start by the relationship between the radius and the electron orbits and its velocity. Okay, and we will find the kinetic and potential energy of electron in an hydrogen atom. Okay, the formula here shows that R equals to E squared divided by 4 pi epsilon naught mv squared, which rearranges to mv squared equal to E square upon 4 pi epsilon naught R. Okay, here E is the electron charge in coulombs, m is the mass of electron, and V is the speed of electron, R is the radius of orbit of electron. Now let's look at the type of energy involved. The electron in a hydrogen atom has both kinetic energy, which is energy of motion, and electrostatic potential energy, which comes from the attraction between the negatively charged electron and positively charged nucleus. We will define both energies and see how they relate to the electron's position. Okay, so here we have the formula for kinetic energy, K equal to half mv squared. Okay, and we have find the value of mv square. Now put this value in the expression of kinetic energy. So this means the kinetic energy depends on the electron distance from the nucleus. Okay, so kinetic energy will become E square upon 8 pi epsilon naught r. So kinetic energy is depending on electron distance from the nucleus, or we can say radius of orbit. For example, if r is 5.3 times 10 to the power minus 11 meters, which is Bohr radius, you can plug in the values to find the kinetic energy in joules. Okay, so now let's look at the potential energy U. The formula is U equals to minus E square upon 4 pi epsilon naught r. According to U equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught Q1 Q2 upon r. This is the formula for electrostatic potential energy. Okay, and for hydrogen atom, the charge on nucleus is E due to one proton, and magnitude of charge of electron is also E. So Q1 and Q2 both are E. Sorry, charge on electron, magnitude of charge on electron is E, but charge on electron is minus E. We will consider minus E here because potential energy can be negative. Okay, but kinetic energy is always positive. Okay, so U is equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. Q1 is E and Q2 is minus E. So minus E square upon 4 pi epsilon naught R. Okay, so this is the potential energy of electron. So negative sign in the potential energy tells us that electrostatic force on the electron points towards the nucleus or in the negative R direction. This means the electron is attracted to the nucleus. The energy would be needed to pull it away. Okay, so it is in the minus R direction. Minus R direction means towards the center, towards the nucleus. Okay, so electrostatic force is towards the nucleus. So negative sign also indicates that electron is bound to the nucleus. It is not free. Okay, so we have to pull it away. We have to give the energy. We have to provide energy to remove it from the orbit. Okay, so let's focus on the total energy of an electron in a hydrogen atom. This is a key concept in atomic physics, as it helps us understand why electrons stay bound to the nucleus. So now let's look at the statement. The total energy E of the electron in a hydrogen atom is the sum of its kinetic energy K and its potential energy U. Remember, kinetic energy is the energy due to the motion, and potential energy here comes from the electrostatic attraction between the electron and the nucleus. Okay, so here is the formula for the total energy. E is equal to kinetic energy plus potential energy K plus U, which is equal to E square upon 8 pi epsilon naught R. And what is potential energy? Minus E square upon 4 pi epsilon naught R. Okay, taking LCM, we combine these terms and we get E equal to total energy equal to minus E square upon 8 pi epsilon naught R. Mark it as 12.4 equation. The negative sign is important. It tells something about the nature of the electron's energy in the atom. Okay, so total energy of electron is negative. Okay, a negative total energy means the electron doesn't have enough energy to escape the attraction of the nucleus on its own. So negative total energy indicates that electron is bound to the nucleus. In other words, energy would need to be supplied to the electron for it to break free from the atom. This is why atoms are stable and don't just fall apart. If the total energy E were positive, okay, the electron would not stay in the closed orbit around the nucleus. It would escape. So negative energy is what keeps the electron in its orbit. So now let's cover example 12.3. Question is about the hydrogen atom. It tells us that 13.6 electron volt of energy is needed to separate a hydrogen atom into a proton and an electron. Okay, so only one electron is present in the hydrogen atom. So to remove that electron, we need 13.6 electron volt. It is given in the question. This value is called the ionization energy of hydrogen atom. So what is ionization energy? So ionization energy is the minimum energy required to remove the electron, loosely bound electron, from the atom. Okay. So focus on how the question asks to find two things: the orbital radius, okay, and the velocity of the electron in a hydrogen atom. Got it? So this is classical atomic physics problem. It tests your understanding of Bohr's model of atom, where the electrons move in fixed orbit around the nucleus. So first, let's focus on the total energy of electron in a hydrogen atom. The energy is given as negative. The negative sign tells us the electron is bound to the nucleus. Okay, so 13.6 electron volt energy is required to remove the electron from hydrogen atom. That means electron is having what amount of energy? It is having negative energy, and it is equal to 13.6 electron volt itself. But it is negative energy. Okay, so that amount of positive energy is to be given to the nucleus, so that total energy of to the electron, so that total energy of electron will become zero, and it will escape the hydrogen atom. Okay, so negative sign tells us the electron is bound to the nucleus, and it would take positive energy to remove it. Okay, this value is specific to the hydrogen atom in its lowest energy state or ground state. We will discuss it in the further lectures also. So let's convert this energy from electron volts to joule. Since joules are the standard SI units for energy, 1 electron volt is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 joules. So multiplying 13.6 by 1.6 times 10 to the power minus 19 joule will give us the energy in joules. Okay, so why we have taken an electron energy as minus 13.6 electron volt? I am explaining again that we require 13.6 electron volt to separate hydrogen atom into proton and electron. Means to remove the electron from hydrogen atom, we need 13.6 electron volt energy. That means in hydrogen atom, electron is having energy minus 13.6 electron volt. So that we will give 13.6 electron volt energy to the electron, and total energy will become minus 13.6 plus 13.6 equal to 0, and electron will escape. Okay, so negative energy indicates electron is bound to the nucleus. So after multiplying, we find total energy of the electron is negative 2.2 times 10 to the power minus 18 joules. This value will be used for the next steps to calculate the orbital radius and the velocity. So let's refer to equation 12.4, which relates the total energy of electrons in its orbits to the radius of that orbit. Okay, this equation is key concept because it connects the energy we have been given to the physical size of the atom. So here energy formula is E equal to minus E square upon 8 pi epsilon naught R. And energy is given minus 2.2 multiplied by 10 to the power minus 18 joule. And formula is also given according to equation 12.4, where E is equal to charge of electron, which is equal to 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb, and 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught is equal to 9 into 10 to the power 9 Newton meter square per coulomb square. Epsilon naught is the permittivity of free space. So let's start by focusing on the orbital radius. The orbital radius is given by equation 12.3. This equation relates the radius of the electron's orbit to the energy required to remove the electron from the atom. Okay, so here is the formula for the orbital radius. R equal to minus E square upon 8 pi epsilon naught E. Okay, so after rearranging, so this according to equation 12.3, R is equal to the formula for orbital radius of electron is R equal to minus E square upon 8 pi epsilon naught E. Okay, where R is radius in meters, E is the charge of the electron. Epsilon naught is the permittivity of free space. So let's substitute the known values into the formula. We will use E equal to 1.6 times 10 to the power minus 19 coulombs, and epsilon naught as 8.85 into 10 to the power minus 12 farad per meters. And E is given, which is equal to minus 2.2 times 10 to the power minus 18 joules. Okay, so after putting the values, R equal to 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught, we will simplify 8 pi epsilon naught into 2 multiplied by 4 pi epsilon naught. Okay, so it will become 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught, which is 9 into 10 is power 9. Okay, and multiply by e square, that is 1.6 into 10 is power minus 19 square upon 2 multiplied by 2 came from where? So 8 pi epsilon naught, we converted it into 2 multiplied by 4 pi epsilon naught. So 2 multiplied by, now E remaining, E is minus 2.2 multiplied by 10 is power minus 18 joules. Okay. So this is equal to 23.04 multiplied by 10 is power minus 29 upon 4.4 into 10 is power minus 18. So finally, after calculating, we find that orbital radius r is 5.3 into 10 is power minus 11 meters. This value is known as Bohr's radius. Okay, so this is the radius of innermost orbit of electron in the hydrogen atom. Okay, so at ground state, this is the radius of orbit of electron in hydrogen atom at ground state. Okay, it is called Bohr's radius and it's a fundamental constant in atomic physics. Its value is 5.3 into 10 is power minus 11 meters. Okay, so it tells us most probable distance between the electron and the nucleus in a hydrogen atom. So to find the velocity of the electron, we will use a formula from earlier in the chapter which relates the electron's mass to its velocity in orbit. Okay, here m stands for the mass of electron and which is 9.1 times 10 is power minus 31 kilograms. Okay, so now let's look at a formula for the orbital radius. R equals to E square divided by 4 pi epsilon naught mv square. So according to equation 12.3, so in the place of E, we have put half mv square. Okay, so the formula modified to this, R equal to E square upon 4 pi epsilon naught mv square. Here E is the charge of electron, epsilon naught is the permittivity of free space. We can rearrange this formula to solve for the velocity. So V equals to E divided by root square root 4 pi epsilon naught mr. Okay, this shows that electron speed depends on its charge and which is finally equal to root 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught multiplied by E upon root m multiplied by r. Okay. Now, after substituting the actual values into the formula, we use the known constant for each variable. So V equals to square root of, so 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught, it is 9 to 10 is power 9. Okay, its value is, so multiplied by E is 1.6 into 10 is power minus 19 upon root mr. So m is 9.1 into 10 is power minus 31 multiplied by what is r? R is Bohr's radius. That is 5.3 we have calculated in the previous slide. 5.3 into 10 is power minus 11. Okay, so after solving it, we find the electron velocity which is about 2.1 times 10 is power 6 meter per second. That's over 2 million meters per second. Okay. So now we'll summarize today's lecture in some brief points. So what is impact parameter, which we use to describe how close an alpha particle comes to a nucleus during a scattering experiment. So the impact parameter is the perpendicular distance from the center of the nucleus to the initial straight line path of incoming alpha particle. Focus on how the value of B affects the deflection of the alpha particle. If B is large, meaning the particle passes far away from the nucleus, the deflection is weak because the electric force is weaker at greater distances. If B is small, so the particle passes closer to the nucleus, the deflection is much stronger due to stronger repulsive force. When B equals to 0, the alpha particle is aimed directly at the center of the nucleus. In this special case, the particle is deflected straight back along its original path, which means the scattering angle theta is 180 degrees or pi radians. Now let's look at the Rutherford formula for the number of alpha particles scattered at a particular angle theta per unit area. The formula tells us that n theta is proportional to 1 divided by sine to the power 4 theta by 2. In other words, as the scattering angle increases, the number of particles scattered at that angle drops off very quickly. Okay, for example, if theta is small, sine theta by 2 is small. So n theta is large. Okay, but for large angles, n theta becomes smaller. This formula is crucial in showing that most of the atom is empty spaced. So according to Rutherford, almost all the mass and all the positive charge of atoms are concentrated in a tiny central region called the nucleus. So in Rutherford's model, electron move around the nucleus in orbit, similar to how planets orbit the sun. Another important point is that atom as a whole is electrically neutral. This means the total positive charge in the nucleus is exactly balanced by the total negative charge of the electrons. Okay, so the electrons are kept in their orbits by a centripetal force which is provided by the electrostatic attraction between the negatively charged electrons and the positively charged nucleus. This is similar to how gravity keeps the planet in orbit. Okay, but here it's electric force doing this job. So here is the relationship between the radius of the electron's orbit r and its velocity. Okay, so the relationship is r is equal to e square upon 4 pi epsilon naught mv square. In this formula, E is charge of electron, epsilon naught is permittivity of free space, m is mass of electron, v is the velocity of electron. Finally, let's look at the total energy of the electron in hydrogen atom, which is given by E is equal to minus E square upon 8 pi epsilon naught r. Negative sign means the electron is bound to the nucleus and it would take energy to remove it. So there are some practice questions based on today's topic. So what is the scattering angle theta when an alpha particle undergoes a head-on collision with the nucleus? When impact parameter is 0. And another practice question is, for a strong deflection of alpha particle, should the impact parameter be large or small? Okay, for greater angle theta, for deflection through greater angle theta, so impact parameter should be large or small. So you have to think about it. So this is all about today's lecture. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you.